Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So I've got an interesting story that in some ways is a follow-up to a story that I covered a couple of weeks ago. Remember the story about Tommy the chimp? I think it was Tommy. It might have been Timmy. But there was the chimpanzee in New York. I forget what city. It wasn't New York City, but it was somewhere in New York State. There was the chimpanzee that some legal rights group, I think it was the Non-Human Persons Rights Group, had filed a lawsuit on behalf of the chimp, seeking to have the chimp recognized as a non-human person. Well, now that there's not news about this particular chimpanzee, but there is news that is somewhat similar. In Argentina, there is a Sumatran orangutan, or actually orangutan. I growing up had always heard it called orangutan, but there's no G, so mark that up to stupid people teaching other people incorrect words. But in Argentina, there's a Sumatran orangutan that is 29 years old, named Sandra. And an Argentine court ruled that Sandra has some of the same legal rights as humans and has a status of non-human person. Sandra, again, who is 29 years old, has spent the last 20 years in captivity at the Buenos Aires Zoo. She is described as shy and reluctant to show herself from her enclosure, and she gained representation. I don't know how she gained representation, but somehow she gained representation from the Association of Professional Lawyers for Animal Rights. The acronym there is AFADA, so AFADA is how it's referred to in Argentina. So if I mention AFADA later, then that's what I am referring to. The Association for Professional Lawyers for Animal Rights Attorneys filed a habeas corpus petition on behalf of the ape, or actually, ape, orangutans or apes, on her behalf in November, based on what was called the unjustified confinement of an animal with probable cognitive capabilities. On Sunday, the court agreed with AFADA attorneys, or rather with the arguments of the AFADA attorneys, that Sandra was denied her freedom as a non-human person, a distinction that places her as a human in a philosophical rather than a physical sense. If the case is not appealed by the Buenos Aires Zoo within 10 days, Sandra will be moved to a primate sanctuary in Brazil and will have a little more freedom. Although the article does not say what freedoms the orangutan would have in Brazil, it just says that she would have more freedoms. So I do still have questions on this about whether or not non-human animals of any kind should be recognized as a non-human person. And the reason that I have questions about this is, well, honestly, it's really easy to tell that a cat is not a person, a dog is not a person, a pig is not a person. Monkeys, obviously, by the looks of it, they are not people. However, you then have to ask and answer the question of, do any of these animals that are mentioned, or any of the animals that I did not mention, do animals have any rights? And if so, what rights? Now, it can be argued, and I would probably agree with the argument, that animals have the right to not be abused. Because, I don't think that if somebody owns a dog that they should, beat the dog. That is very wrong, in my opinion. I also think that, if there's a dog in the wild, no one is under obligation to then take in and care for the dog and feed the dog. But if you're going to adopt a pet, then you take on responsibilities. Responsibilities include cleaning after and feeding your animal. I would also say responsibilities include not beating your animal. Now, if you are going to eat animals for food, then I think that you should kill the animal in as quick and painless a manner as possible. And I know that might sound weird to people that, are either vegetarians and think, well, there's no way to kill an animal that's not painless. And I didn't say kill him painlessly. I said as painless as possible. The difference being there are ways, extremely painful ways and torturous ways to kill animals, and then there are less painful ways. So, for instance, some of the cows, I think they'll wind up just like shooting in the head. And, one bullet shot and the cow is dead. There are other ways where they tase the cow, then they cut the cow's throat, let it bleed to death. I would say that that's a more painful way to kill an animal. Painful for the animal, not painful for the person doing it. But I think you get my point. So I do think that, animals should not be abused. Does that mean that animals have legal rights? If an animal is being abused, can someone then claim to be the animal's attorney, file a lawsuit against the person abusing the animal? And I think that's where you get into sort of this weird, tricky legal distinction sort of thing. And, okay, if we're going to start recognizing animals as non-human persons that have rights and anyone can just claim to be the attorney for an animal, then where does it stop? Does it stop with mammals? Does it extend to reptiles? Does it extend to invertebrates, meaning animals that do not have a spine? So could someone claim to represent a crustacean? Could someone claim to represent an octopus? Because octopi are very intelligent creatures. Could someone claim to represent an octopi, and that an octopi, or rather an octopus, octopi being the plural of octopus, so could someone, claim to represent a group of octopi and have the entire group of octopi recognized as non-human persons that have rights to not be turned into, some delicacy? It's one of those, it's a slippery slope, and I think that, it's a conversation that definitely needs to be had. And there's a little bit more to this story that I will get into when we come back. There's also news out of North Korea, where apparently Kim Jong-un isn't happy about the movie The Interview and is threatening the U.S. with retaliation if the U.S. somehow does something to North Korea for the supposed hack of Sony.
Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorcFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. So there's more on this story out of Argentina, where an orangutan has been recognized as a non-human person. The story here from UPI, and I will post the link in the show notes so you can read the full story yourself. And if you speak Spanish, then there's a story from La Nación newspaper out of Argentina. And I don't speak Spanish. And I tried using Google Translate to translate from Spanish into English. But because Google doesn't catch nuances and whatnot, it just does a strict, this is what the word says. So the sentence structure came out incredibly poor, and some of the words I could tell were not translated the way they should be. So unfortunately, I cannot provide to you an English translation of the article out of La Nación. But again, if you speak Spanish or if you know a better translating thing than Google, then you can read that article that is cited here in the UPI story. The story continues with a quote from the lawyer Paul Buampadre, who's one of the lawyers for AFADO, which is the Association of Professional Lawyers for Animal Rights. He told La Nación, quote, "This opens the way not only for other great apes, but also for other sentient beings, which are unfairly and arbitrarily deprived of their liberty in zoos, circuses, water parks, and scientific laboratories." However, Adrian Sestello, I think I'm pronouncing that right, who's the head of biology at the Buenos Aires Zoo, warned against applying human traits to animals, telling La Nación, "When you don't know the biology of a species, to unjustifiably claim it suffers abuse, is stressed or depressed, is to make one of man's most common mistakes, which is to humanize animal behavior." And again, I think it's very interesting, and it's a conversation that needs to be had, not just from the moral, philosophical, and ethical standpoint, but also to determine from a legal standpoint. And yes, there is a distinction between what is moral, what is ethical, and what is legal. Currently, it is perfectly legal to, only in the states of Colorado, Washington, Alaska, and there is one other, Oregon, to possess cannabis. Does that make it immoral or unethical to do so in the rest of the United States? You can currently possess those things in Portugal. I believe the Netherlands has completely decriminalized most substances, as well as it's either Uruguay or Paraguay down in South America. You will not go to jail for possessing cannabis in those places. Does that make it immoral or unethical to possess in the rest of the world? I would say no. It just makes it illegal. And, laws are supposed to be based on morals, but then whose morals do you apply? Do you apply Christian morals? Do you apply Hindu morals? Do you apply Jewish morals? Do you apply Muslim morals? And that's where you get into the thing of having this monopoly system of governance to where someone somewhere is making the rules. And I don't think that there should be the coercive government that exists. There should not be coercive governance at all. Every person should live under the governance that they want. Which means if you want to live somewhere to where people wind up going to jail for possessing certain plants, then that's fine. You should be able to live there. Just don't force that on someone who doesn't want people to go to jail for possessing plants. And also, the way I envision a freer society is to where there would be what's called a polycentric civilization, meaning that I might not have the same governance or even the same set of rules that I live by as the person living next door to me, and they might not have the same set of rules as the person living on the other side of their house, and there could there could potentially be thousands of competing societies. And I don't even really want to say competing societies, because that makes it sound as though that they are somehow in conflict with one another. Shall we say complementary societies that are living amongst one another, and they are not forcing their society or their rules or ethics or morals onto anyone else. Now, there would have to be some sort of thing set up to where if people from different societies wound up having conflicts, that you could make those conflicts not turn into big giant problems, and that you could resolve those conflicts and resolve those disputes. And there are historical examples of how this has been done. Ireland was one of these, polycentric civilizations for thousands of years. There were also polycentric civilizations in what is now Saudi Arabia about 1,500 years ago. There have been, these polycentric societies that have existed, and, let's look at those as examples of how to make it happen again. But one thing that so many people get caught up on is, this whole idea of one government. Well, we're all living in one area, so therefore we have to have one government. Well, no, you don't. Just because that's how it is now doesn't mean that's how it's always been, and doesn't mean that's how it's always going to be. So back to the article here, because there is just a little bit left. It says the ruling follows a habeas corpus writ filed by the Non-Human Rights Project in New York in December on behalf of a chimpanzee, which the group argued was unlawfully imprisoned. That case was thrown out, and the judge wrote that the chimpanzee cannot bear any legal duties, submit to societal responsibilities, or be held legally accountable for their actions. And you may recall last year the Indian government outlawed the captivity of dolphins, noting that the species should be seen as non-human persons, and as such should have their own specific rights. Now, let's move away from talking about non-human persons and what rights they should have, and let's talk about North Korea. Because it's really interesting what's going on here. Sony was hacked. Information about this movie called The Interview apparently came out, and it's upset the North Koreans because the movie depicts a fictitious account of an execution of Kim Jong-un, and now movie theaters are scared to play the movie. There's more when we come back. Peace, love, Liberty Radio.
Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorkFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. ExpressCoin is the best choice for buying Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, and more. ExpressCoin prides themselves on their customer service, so much so that the back end on the website should allow them to be even more focused on your needs. Get your cryptocurrencies with money order, check, wire transfer, or cash deposit. Get started at expresscoin.fppradio.com. That's expresscoin.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So the story here from UPI about North Korea says, in a strongly worded statement, North Korea threatened additional retaliation for production of the Hollywood film The Interview. The long statement from North Korea's National Defense Commission, whose chief is North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, called for unspecified attacks against the White House, Pentagon, and the whole U.S. mainland, accused the White House of involvement in the film, and denied the nation was behind the cyber attacks against Sony Pictures Entertainment, the U.S. subsidiary of the Japanese Sony Corporation, as it prepared to release the film, a fictional comedy about an assassination attempt against Kim. The statement released by the North Korean state-run news agency KCNA also said the U.S. was incorrect to blame North Korea for the cyber attacks, and used phrasing typical of official statements referring to the United States as a cesspool of terrorism. The statement said in part, "Nothing is a more serious miscalculation than guessing that just a single movie production company is the target of this counteraction. Our targets are the citadels of the U.S. imperialists who earned the bitterest grudge of all Koreans. The Army and people of the DPRK are fully ready to stand in confrontation with the United States in all war spaces, including cyber warfare, to blow up the citadels." In a separate announcement, Pyongyang said it would not take part in an upcoming United Nations Security Council meeting to discuss North Korea's human rights record. Last week, the UN General Assembly voted to recommend a trial in the International Criminal Court. So what is interesting here is, if you aren't really sure of what's going on with the Sony Pictures thing, there was a hack. And some of the information about, I think it was Sony employees, wound up getting leaked. The U.S. government has blamed North Korea, and President Obama has vowed retaliation against North Korea, although he has been very unspecific on what that retaliation would be. And now Kim Jong-un is saying that he will retaliate against the United States because the movie was even made. But yet, it's kind of interesting that there was the Team America movie that was made about a decade ago that depicted the Kims in a very unpopular light, or rather in a negative light, and there was no retaliation then. So it's one of these things. It's really, really suspicious, and I don't know if the movie studio, they're saying that they're going to figure out a way to release the film. I think, they might just be taking advantage of all of the free publicity for the movie, and, they're trying to figure out a way to wind up turning, lemons into lemonade, or even into margaritas, if you will, by saying, hey, you know what? We're still going to release this film, and we're going to make a bunch of money on the film. But just the entire thing seems very strange when you have national governments that are getting, so involved in, saying, we're going to retaliate against you, and, well, we're going to retaliate against you. And, it would be really silly to think that, there could be a real-life war because of a movie. A movie, a fictional account of something could possibly wind up being what prompts a real-life war. So let's read the story here about the UN General Assembly condemning North Korean abuses, because this is something that somehow I missed. I totally missed this, and I don't know how I missed it, because I'm reading news every day because I do a daily newscast. But somehow this, slipped past me. The story says, in a non-binding vote on Thursday, the United Nations General Assembly voted to refer charges of crimes against humanity by North Korea to the International Criminal Court. The 116-20 vote, with over 50 abstentions, has little bearing on the charges, except that the resolution will be forwarded to the UN Security Council, which has the power to send the matter to the court. A meeting to discuss the resolution for the first time is scheduled today, but Russia and China are likely to vote against it. The vote in the General Assembly came after a 400-page report from the UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in February, which detailed torture and human rights violations in North Korea. North Korea's envoy to the General Assembly said the resolution does not reflect the reality on the ground, adding a U.S. Senate report on the CIA's interrogation procedures after September 11, 2001, should also be the subject of investigation. And I agree. There should be an investigation, a much more in-depth investigation, and one with actual penalties for the people that were torturing people on behalf of the CIA. Now, there was obviously the Senate report and the Senate investigation where they did the approximate 6,000-page report on the torture done by the CIA. There was the 500-plus page summary of that report that was made public. But the Department of Justice says, yeah, we already knew everything in there. Nobody's going to wind up getting punished. Now, there should actually be a court somewhere that hears these stories and actually, is able to punish the people that were torturing people. But I don't think that's going to happen. So, I kind of have to agree with the North Korean envoy to the United Nations saying that there should be an investigation into what the CIA did. But because the United States is on the Security Council and they can veto anything that goes before the Security Council, they're never going to allow that to happen. So there needs to be, some other system set up to investigate the human rights abuses done by the U.S. government. Now, I'm not saying that, just because the U.S. should be investigated, I'm not saying North Korea shouldn't be. I'm just saying that the U.S. government should be as well. I think that every government that exists, especially coercive governments, because I don't know of any government that exists right now that's not a coercive government, every government should be investigated for potential human rights abuses, and anybody that is abusing human rights should be punished for abusing human rights. I'm not letting anybody off the hook here. So, before people start saying, Darryl hates America, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying, these people should be held accountable, and These people should be held accountable. Everybody should be held accountable for what they do. That includes the American government. Hey, don't forget, every Wednesday there's the Ask Me Anything. Send your questions, AMA@fppradio.com. Online, fppradio.com.